So Ashley, after discovery, I think a common thing that people experience in recovery is they'll begin to recognize and see how much they have hurt their spouse.
Mm-hmm.
And while that can be a good thing, this isn't quite the same as empathy. So how do we go from simply feeling bad about things we've done and how we've hurt people to actually empathizing with their pain?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and this can be, I mean, it really can be difficult because one, you both have to be willing. You both have to be willing to just like navigate this very difficult season of being vulnerable at the risk of it hurting or triggering another person, being okay that you may have caused the other person pain without you backing into some rescuing behaviors or, I mean, it's so intricate. And this is why group is so important, because there's people that have been there ahead of you. And so as you explained with Michelle, like this is not just, oh, I'm trying to be your nanny. I've had to go through seasons of that as saying, okay, I want to tell him that this is impacting my self-image. I'm having trouble trusting him. It's impacting our sexual relationship. But I'm afraid if I tell him, then he'll feel like I'm parenting him. I'm smothering him. He's back in his home life where he has no choices.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have to be willing to take the risk that it might create a little conflict. And that's why group is so important. Like, I think you have to have outside people. I can't always be the one helping John develop empathy and vice versa. And so you have to have other people. And then when you're in group, you see yourself in other people's stories. You see the guy who's coming and struggling, and you can relate and you can hurt for him and know that I've been there too. But it's almost like you're starting to see yourself in another person,
Mm-hmm.
and you know that you want to offer them comfort and support and encouragement, and so maybe you can start to offer yourself that as well. I think the emotional impact letter is a big deal. It can feel almost bad to write it out, like these are all the way you've hurt me, and whether it's you're going through how I've been wounded inventory or writing an emotional impact letter, the idea is that you, as the betrayed spouse, are writing out all the ways this has hurt. Has it hurt your family financially? Has it hurt you physically, sexually, in your walk of as a parent, in your career? I mean, I've gone through the list and showed John and told him that he really benefits also from examples. Like, he's never been betrayed by a spouse or a close friend, and so I sometimes have to be like, have you ever experienced betrayal?
Yeah.
Like, can you think back and experience betrayal? I know for me as a young, struggling, addicted mom, I lacked empathy in parenting. And so when I first opened up our Betrayal and Beyond and went through the abuse inventory, I self-identified some of those things as a parent. Like, you shouldn't be making such a big deal about that, emotional abuse and things that were on the inventory. And I had to correct that by really just practicing. Like, even though I may not feel it, they fall and scrape themselves and I want to be like, get up, shake it off. Like, I had to practice what I know is right. And eventually it did become second nature, or practice. I think I have ADD. It's undiagnosed. But when people are sick in my house, I have a very low tolerance unless it's a cute little kid. And I just am like, you have a man cold. You need to get over it. But when I'm sick, I appreciate people like nurturing me and loving me. And so I have to think, really, that golden rule, like, how would I want to be treated? And even though I'm not feeling like pausing and making something for John, I know that's what I like, and I know it would bless him. And so just sometimes you have to do it even though you don't feel it, and then it starts to become more natural.
Yeah. We'll talk about some of those strategies more in the tools, but I know that's been helpful for me when my wife on a few occasions has said, like, imagine if this happened to you. And she will describe a scenario that does kind of flip it more to things I care about or that are important to me. And it's like, oh, yeah, I would not like that at all. And she's like, that's how I'm feeling. Like, oh. So those metaphors can be helpful. I think a reality is that I can be hesitant as a struggler to enter into your pain because it's going to make me feel my pain. That if I really acknowledge how much it's hurt you and enter into your pain a little bit and feel it, that could potentially cause more guilt and shame for me. And I think in addiction, then we just try to avoid that. I mean, that's so much what addiction is about, is avoidance. And even in recovery, we're still going to be battling avoidance. And so to see it as that, and to name that, and also to see it as minimization, because that's a big part of addiction, that to live with ourselves, to have some mental well-being, we will minimize our behaviors so that we can sleep at night and be a functional human being. And in recovery, we're still maybe trapped in the minimizing, like it wasn't really that bad, or why are people making such a big deal of it? But I think that's where that tool you mentioned, like the emotional impact letter, can be so healing, because it's hard to minimize things that are put in black and white, and like, here's everything I'm going through and what this has done to me. And if we're willing to enter into that and let ourselves feel it, even if it is painful, and hopefully with the help of group or counseling, we've got others that are helping us navigate the voice of shame and, those negative voices. But if we can be present with the pain that we've caused and allow ourselves to feel it, I think that was a huge part of our journey as a couple, because I was willing to see it as seriously as my wife was.
Yeah.
And I think when we only feel bad about what we've done, there usually comes a but at the end of that statement. Like, oh, I really feel bad that I've hurt you, but you'll get over it. Mm-hmm. Or I really feel bad that I've hurt you, but I think you're making too big of a deal of this. So maybe we don't say that but part out loud, but we're thinking it, and we're trying to keep ourselves kind of free of having to go there. And so just saying, I'm sorry I've hurt you, or I know you're feeling bad, that is a good step. It's good to start seeing the impact of our behavior. But it does take us to another layer of healing when we enter into someone else's pain and we let it be big.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think what you kind of honed in on is, if we don't break the denial and completely own our behaviors and how they've hurt ourselves and others, it's going to be really hard to empathize. And I think that's why, we have our groups the way they are. We have the spouse over here working through betrayal trauma, and then you have the struggler over here working through the who, what, when, why, how, and understanding their addiction so that they can own it. Because when John went into group, it was like, well, I look at porn because you had a baby and you can't have sex for 6 weeks, and it's like, well, no, then that doesn't explain the 20 years before we were married,
right.
So there's entering into group and thinking that you know why, and then really coming out, hopefully, if you've done the work, and understanding why. And until you get to that point, you really can't move on to that third phase of bringing together. Now, I've processed through the betrayal trauma. I've understood my addiction and got some recovery under my belt. And now we need to really help each other through those triggers, because you have to be at some kind of healthy state to be able to enter in and feel somebody's pain and know that you might get triggered and you might feel bad about it, but keep doing the right steps rather than shutting down and re-isolating and reacting out.
Yeah. And as my wife and I will say a lot in our relationship or to our kids, that might help explain it, but that doesn't excuse it.
Yes.
And we still have work to do.